Okay, we'll start our next presentation here. We have enCore Energy Corp. It's listed on the Venture Exchange under the symbol EU. From the company, we have William Sheriff, who's the executive chairman, and will be presenting this afternoon.
Thank you. I want to thank everyone for being here and acknowledge Denver Gold for seeing one of the more exciting commodities in the current market, that being uranium, which has really started to perform after a decade of in the doldrums. So we're enCore Energy. I would like to tell you about us. We're a in situ related company. We're totally focused in the US on in situ uranium. We've recently announced a merger, so this conversation will include various aspects of that. The disclaimer, I will be making some forward-looking statements. This is just a little bit of our background. With the rather dismal decade following Fukushima and uranium, many folks are not aware of the names in the sector. We've been around for quite a while, have a very good pedigree. This timeline from the bottom up gives you a bit of an idea of where we've come from, who we are. On the lower left, you'll see Energy Metals Corp, and on the lower right, Mystania Uranium. These were both formed in 2004, just in front of the last big uranium cycle, where we saw uranium prices move to $135 a pound before falling precipitously after the world financial collapse in 08. Energy Metals Corp went on to sell out to Uranium One after building what was at the time the largest U.S. uranium resource base in the history of the country. And following about a year's stint on Uranium One's board, I left and took a good number of the folks with me to form enCore Energy. This was in 2011, just weeks before Fukushima, so the timing might not have been the best. At the same time, Paul Goranson, our CEO, who had started Mystania Uranium, went on to operate the plant for a number of years, and then went on to serve as president of Cameco Resources, Uranergy Energy, a number of others. We combined teams late last year after realizing in 2020 that the winds in the uranium market had actually changed considerably from pretty resistant headwinds for the decade. Now we saw tailwinds swinging around in our favor. Here again, this was primarily demand driven. The unique perfect storm, if you will, of 04 to 07 was created by a number of mines having interruptions and curtailment of supply. This time we see a really different picture emerging with the green energy sector, the carbon suppression. You can't get there with windmills and solar cells. As we all know in this industry, the sun doesn't shine every day. So you've got to have something for that base load, and nuclear power is the only choice that's a green energy. So with that in mind, enCore, which had a great team, as I say, we went on a worldwide recruitment effort, and we're fortunate enough to bring Paul Goranson, our CEO, who's somewhere in the room here. There he is. He came in to join us as leader, and we're quite happy to have him. We embarked on our first transformative transaction, Westwater Resources, which we closed on December 31st of last year. That saw us acquire 2 fully licensed ISR production plants in Texas, along with quite a bit of a resource base in New Mexico and historic resources in Texas near those plants. I would mention that our strategy is to build the company through M&A. Obviously, the second one I mentioned already is Arga, is the second one in 12 months, and it fits so nicely in with our production plans, as you'll see. That's in 2021. We've announced that. It brings very advanced projects in South Dakota and Wyoming that fit right in our timeline. And as you can see in the 2022 to 2024 realm, we'll be in production in Texas, South Dakota, and moving towards Wyoming. So here again, we plan to be the leading ISR firm in the US. We've got 2 licensed plants, as I mentioned. Turnkey capabilities in Texas. We're spending just under $1 million right now, putting final touches on a modernization of the Rosita plant. Incidentally, these 2 plants are not limited in their capacity by regulatory permits. They're currently built out to 800,000 pounds a year, but modular and very easy to increase that. Here again, not limited by permits. Once the Texas production is in place, we plan to move directly into the Dewey Burdock project in South Dakota, followed quickly by the Gas Hills, Wyoming project. Here again, all of these are ISL or ISRable, and that should provide us the pathline or the path to growth to achieve something in the 3 to 4 million pounds a year production area, with our long-term resources being in New Mexico. The combined company has 43101 compliant resources of just under 100 million pounds, with 90 million of that being measured and indicated. And we're just incredibly well positioned to benefit from the nuclear renaissance that's overtaking the globe, and in particular the U.S. With our proven management and our quality properties, we think we'll be able to repeat our successes of the past. This map will show you these resources. They show you all of the primary uranium production areas in the U.S., along with our assets, which from north to south, here again, and this is on a combined pro forma basis with Ozarga, include the Dewey Burdock project in South Dakota, Gas Hills in Wyoming, and I'm only mentioning the major key projects here, Crownpoint and Hosta Butte in New Mexico, Marquez in New Mexico, and then also all of the assets in Texas. It's a good point to mention that Texas and Wyoming are the places you want to be in uranium primarily. These are what they call agreement states. That means you don't deal with the federal government on permitting issues. It's one window shopping or one-stop service for your permits, and that's at the state level. So it's very much streamlined. It does not mean that it's not a rigorous process, but it's got very well-defined timelines. And here again, only going through one set of regulators makes it a far better proposition for us. Our company is founded with great individuals, as I said, and I'd be glad to put our team up against any in the ISR business. A smaller company, larger company, just really doesn't matter. And you can certainly see this in the presentation and in the materials, and read it as well as on our website. But I want to call your attention rather to several people. I've already mentioned Paul Goranson, our CEO, and his tenure at a number of the big companies in the uranium business. Operated and designed and built a number of ISR plants worldwide. Also, Chief Technical Officer Dennis Stover, our former CEO. He is one of the two co-founders or co-inventors of the ISR process, holding 6 patents. He's an incredible resource for us moving forward. Richard Cherry, also with pushing 40 years of experience, mostly with the General Atomics Group, the Blue Brothers, with Cotter and with nuclear fuels. Expert in dealing with contracts with the nuclear utilities, who are our ultimate customers. So those contracts, very important. Eric Paliza brings 40 years of ISR experience, half of that in permitting, half of it in operations. And rounding out our crew, Bill Harris. When we went to the New York Stock Exchange in 2007 with our previous effort, Energy Metals, he was kind enough to join us as our independent audit chair and compliance with Sarbanes-Oxley requirements. Stuck with the group ever since. And importantly, I would mention, might have failed to mention it with the new merger, we will be looking at uplisting to the NASDAQ or NASDAQ. And of course, his being on the board will facilitate that as well. A couple of key additions from Ozarga. Blake Steele, their current CEO. He'll be joining us as Chief Technical Advisor. He's based in Hong Kong. He'll be key in nurturing those relationships in Asia. And a new addition to the board, Sandra McKay. She's coming from Ozarga. Deep history or background in resource law, principally with lead counsel for Chevron Canada, as well as about a decade in the uranium industry. So we're quite happy to have her join us as well. Here you can see the side-by-side comparisons of the two companies. And I won't dwell on it a whole lot, but point out that we do have, on a pro forma basis, about a $550 million market cap. Well-funded with $21 million in the bank. And I would point out that the one significant change is at the bottom, 200,000 pounds of uranium inventory. That is now down to 100,000, having taken advantage of the recent run-up. These are some of the headlines that I'm sure you've seen, different places, different folks from different places in the audience. But one of the key ones for us is bipartisan support in the U.S. Congress. Right now, it's probably the only thing that the two parties agree on other than disagreeing, and that's nuclear power. So it's the first time in 5 decades we've enjoyed that. And it's key to our success. Certainly will make it a lot easier anyway. The U.S. Uranium Reserve, that's bipartisan here again. That's implemented a nice tailwind to the process in our story. And being a critical mineral certainly puts us on the top list in terms of getting things developed. I also like to mention the Russian suspension agreement. That was key to the future, getting that extended and under more favorable terms to the domestic industry. Key to the future. So, global uranium environment. This is all set against a backdrop of a surge in new builds. We've got 154 nuclear reactors planned, constructed, or under construction now. That represents 35% increase to the current fleet. I would also mention that most of these reactors are larger than the ones in service currently, which here again will reflect a bigger fuel demand. Here again, a lot of these are in China, India, the Middle East, Russia. These are your key areas of build. Japan, obviously after Fukushima shut everything down, about half of those are back online about a quarter of those are back online with another 16 having applied for restarts. So no longer a factor coming into the market like they were with fuel, now looking towards the future with safer, more reliable operations. And just to highlight the U.S. and why we're there and why we're focused on U.S., it is the world's largest consumer of nuclear power and uranium, of course. 20% of the electricity, and more importantly, 55% of the green energy or the carbon-free electricity comes from nuclear plants. And increased power authorizations on renewals are requiring more fuel for the existing plants. And we're getting a lot of government support. Just yesterday, 4 plants in Illinois were extended, which accounts for about 5 million pounds a year of demand. Those were scheduled to have been closed later this year. So it's all just adding to a really positive picture you can see. Just about 60 million pound deficit in terms of primary supply. So the Texas assets here again, centered around our 2 plants. The Rosita processing plant, as I mentioned, underway in terms of a slight modernization, should be finished in Q2 next year, under $1 million project, fully licensed. Kingsville Dome processing plant, it's a sister plant to Rosita. It is on standby, and we'll bring it along as needed in terms of our production profile as well as demand. And also weighing that against increasing the capacity at Rosita. As I mentioned before, those capacities are not permit constrained. They're simply plant size constrained. Butler Ranch, we've got 1,600 drill holes at Butler Ranch. This is a project we got in the Westwater transaction. Historic resources there. We're now putting together a 43-101 encompassing those 1,600 drill holes and looking at doing a bit of confirmation drilling there. And at Upper Spring Creek, our other project that has already been permitted in the past, which will make it very easy, and in recent years, make it very easy to put that back into the permit and pipeline for feeding our central processing plant at Rosita. Went the wrong direction. Sorry about that. Here's a picture of our 2 plants, Kingsville on the top, Rosita on the bottom. I've already covered a lot of this in terms of their capacity and their modularity so that we can increase their size. Just to let you know, these will be central processing plants. We do have a number of satellite facilities. These are mobile SX-IEW IX plants and 1,000 gallons a minute capacity. These are turnkey. I mean, obviously we'll have to do a bit of infrastructure, pour concrete pads, hook them up, et cetera. And but they will enable us to, for very low cost, to start some of these satellite operations to feed the central processing plants. We're currently not only pursuing these plans, but also looking at additional acquisitions in the Texas area. Very prolific area. USGS has stated there's tens of millions of pounds, hundreds of millions of pounds yet to be discovered or exploited. There's a number of known deposits, 45 of them, I think. And so we're certainly looking at those as a satellite feed for these 2 plants. But our main objective after we get into the initial production will be going to South Dakota. This project is 17 million pounds at a 0.11 grade, which is a very, very good grade for ISR. And you can see it's very well located in terms of infrastructure. It's got a lot of upside left on it. And you can see the PEA that's been done on it, incredibly robust economics. So this will fit into the pipeline somewhere at the end of 23 to 24, somewhere in that time frame. Do have a bit of permitting left to do. The federal permits are all in place. We do have a few state hurdles to overcome, but we'll be working on those immediately following the close of the merger. And of course, Ozarga has been working on them for quite some time to advance it to its current state. The third project in the pipeline for production will be Gas Hills. This is in Wyoming. This is an ISR project again. All of these are. This one's got right at 8 million pounds here again at 0.1, good grade for ISR. And it's in an area of tremendous historic production. There's been over 100 million pounds from this area in the Gas Hills, so it should be a rather straightforward, here again, Wyoming being an agreement state, should be a rather straightforward permitting process. Certainly not going to happen overnight, but we see it giving Dewey Burdock a bit of a race for its money in terms of which one actually gets to the finish line first. We're assuming this will be third. And of course, their locality being close together may very well involve a central processing plant in Wyoming and operating one or both of them as satellites to that. All these things will materialize here again in that 2024 timeframe. Again, robust economics with the PEA already done. You can see the ground at Gas Hills is favorable in terms of terrain for ISR. You don't want too much up and down, not too much rugged topography. And then our long term, this is 5 years out, probably 6 years out. New Mexico is not an agreement state, so you have to go through state permitting as well as federal. So it's going to take a while. Obviously, we have some community issues and some work to do there, which are underway. But we do think it's our Kazakhstan of America, if you will. And I'm stealing that terminology from Paul. Not my original one. I wish I could claim it. It's great, but it is America's Kazakhstan. We've got 500 million pounds sitting out there, and it's been the biggest district in the U.S. Its endowment of uranium is phenomenal. We control roughly 50% of the district. Most of that's under no-cost mineral rights that came associated with the railroad checkerboard through, as you can see, through the district. We had the green part before the original merger last year with Westwater. Westwater brought the blue and the purple. And the one thing I would note in green and red there, Marquez, it's a Spanish land grant, so it's not subject to quite as much in terms of permitting being private land. So that's also one we're holding. It is a conventional one. It's the only conventional asset we're holding, but it's got a good endowment, and here again on private land. Crownpoint and Hosta Butte in New Mexico will undoubtedly be our first ISR project. Here again, pencil it in 5-6 years down the road, and that will be on the heels of Dewey Burdock. Meanwhile, as we're doing these sequential plants, they'll all still be operating. So we see achieving, by the time Crownpoint comes on with its 3 million pound license, and by the way, it is licensed with the NRC. That license is held by a friendly competitor, Laramide, and we've been in discussions and friendly relations with them for years as the properties used to be the same. They ended up with the license. We ended up with a good chunk of the mineral resources. So it'll ultimately someday be developed together. But with its 3 million pounds a year added to the cumulative 3 or 4, maybe even 5 from the previous operations, you can see our path to being the dominant ISR producer in the U.S. So in summary, we think we're well on our way to becoming the U.S. dominant ISR producer. We're a pipeline of advanced development projects. Our biggest key, of course, is the elite technical staff we've got, both the board and in terms of working folks in the field, all under Paul Goranson's leadership. Our leading land position in New Mexico should serve us well, as we see this being really truly a decade-long or more nuclear renaissance, much like before 3 Mile Island. And so we're positioning for the long term, but at the same time, keenly aware of that supply deficit that's looming in the short years. So with a real emphasis on moving into production as quickly as possible. And the fully licensed plants and being in Texas are our key to that. So that, coupled with a continuing, appetite for acquisitions, mergers and acquisitions, consolidation, should see us well. And I thank you very much for all your attention.
Great, thanks a lot. We have time for one quick question. About 20 seconds. So just wondering with the transaction with Ozarga, when is that scheduled to close?
Should be a shareholder vote sometime around the first week or 2 of November. And it's so far receiving rave reviews from both parties. It fits very well. Their property just drops right into our production timeline just perfectly. And You know, they're adding a bit of technical expertise to an already incredible team. So it makes a lot of sense for all parties.
Excellent. Perfect.
Thank you.
Thanks.